Kethvor had spent 2 years living among humans, and he had grown to love them. It was a strange thing to admit, even to himself. The Velrani were taught from birth that younger species were beneath notice. Humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 3 centuries ago. They were babies in the eyes of the galaxy. But Kethvor had watched them laugh at their own failures. He had seen them cry at sad stories that were not even real. He had observed them share food with strangers and fight to protect people they had never met. They were messy, loud, and emotional. They made no sense at all, and Kethvor found them wonderful. He served as a cultural attaché on the Velrani diplomatic vessel, Serenity's Light. His job was simple. Watch the humans. Learn their ways. Report back to his people. It was supposed to be boring work, the kind given to young Velrani, who had not yet proven themselves worthy of real assignments. But Kethvor did not find it boring. He found it fascinating. Commander Daniel Carter was his primary contact among the humans. Carter was a military liaison, a man of middle years, with gray touching his dark hair and lines around his eyes that deepened when he smiled. He smiled often. He had taught Kethvor how to play poker, a human card game built entirely on lies and reading faces. Kethvor was terrible at it. Carter won every game but never made him feel stupid for losing. That was the thing about humans. They could have made the younger species feel small. They chose not to. Ambassador Lyra Seth, Kethvor's superior, did not share his fondness for humanity. She was old and wise, and had seen many species rise and fall across her long life. To her, humans were a passing curiosity. Interesting, perhaps, but ultimately unimportant. She often reminded Kethvor not to grow too attached. Species like humans burned bright and died fast. It was the way of things. Kethvor listened to her words but did not believe them in his heart. Then the Drakon attacked New Haven. The news came on an ordinary morning. Kethvor was eating breakfast in the ship's common area when he noticed the humans around him going quiet. One by one, they stopped talking. They stopped eating. They stared at their communication devices with expressions he could not read. He found Commander Carter standing alone in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The man's back was to him, but something in his posture made Kethvor hesitate at the door. "Carter," he said softly. "What has happened?" Carter did not turn around. His voice was flat and empty when he spoke. The Drakon hegemony hit New Haven this morning. Full orbital bombardment. No warning. No demands. They just started firing. Kethvor felt his stomach twist. New Haven was a human colony world. He had never visited, but he knew it was a peaceful place. Farming communities, families, children. "How bad?" he asked. 40,000 confirmed dead so far. The number will rise. Carter paused. They hit the central hospital first. It was full of refugees from the border conflicts. Women, children, the sick and wounded. The Drakon knew exactly what they were targeting. Kethvor did not know what to say. In Velrani culture, there were formal words of condolence, ancient phrases meant to acknowledge grief. But they all felt hollow now. He waited for Carter to rage. He expected shouting, cursing, threats of vengeance. That was what the stories said about humans. They were emotional creatures who let their feelings control them. But Carter did not rage. He simply stood there, staring at the stars. And when he finally turned around, Kethvor saw something that frightened him more than any anger could have. Carter's eyes were empty. Not sad, not furious, just empty. Like someone had reached inside him and turned off a light. "I need to make some calls," Carter said. His voice was calm. Too calm. "Excuse me." He walked past Kethvor without another word. Kethvor reported the attack to Ambassador Lyra Seth immediately. She received the news with her usual detachment. "Unfortunate," she said, her long fingers folding together. "But not unexpected. The Drakon have been expanding aggressively for decades. It was only a matter of time before they clashed with someone. They killed 40,000 civilians, Kethvor said. A hospital full of children. Yes, war is cruel. The ambassador's expression did not change. I advise we maintain strict neutrality in this conflict. The Draken are powerful. The humans are young. This will not end well for Earth's children. You think the Drakon will win? I think it is inevitable. The Drakon have been conquering worlds for 1,000 years. Humans have been among the stars for 3 centuries. The math is simple. Kethvor wanted to argue, but he did not have the words. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps this was simply how the universe worked. The strong crushed the weak. The old devoured the young, but something in Carter's empty eyes stayed with him. Over the following days, Kethvor noticed something strange. Human communications were going dark. Channels that had been open and friendly before were now silent. Military frequencies that used to chatter with casual conversation were locked down tight. He asked Carter about it, but the commander only shook his head. Operational security, he said. Nothing to worry about. But Kethvor did worry. The humans around him had changed. They still smiled when they saw him. They still said good morning and asked about his day. But there was something behind their eyes now, something cold and patient and waiting. He did not understand what he was seeing. Not yet. A week after the attack, Carter found Kethvor alone in the library. The commander stood in the doorway for a long moment before speaking. You should go home, he said quietly. Back to your people. Kethvor looked up from his reading. Why? Carter stepped closer. His voice dropped low, as if he did not want anyone else to hear. Because what comes next is not something you want to see. What we are about to do is not something you should witness. What are you going to do? Carter's jaw tightened. He looked away, and for a moment, Kethvor saw a flash of something in his eyes. Pain, grief, and beneath it, something darker. We are going to show the galaxy what happens when you hurt our children, Carter said. And you do not want to see what we become when we stop being kind. He turned and walked away, leaving Kethvor alone with the weight of his words. That night, Kethvor made his decision. He would not go home. He would stay and watch. He would document whatever happened next. For history, it was the worst decision he ever made. 3 weeks after New Haven, Kethvor stood on the bridge of the human destroyer USS Vanguard and watched the largest military fleet he had ever seen assemble in the darkness between stars. He had requested transfer from the Velrani diplomatic vessel to the human fleet as an official neutral observer. Ambassador Lyraseth had objected strongly. She called it foolish, dangerous, and beneath his station. But she could not overrule his request. The Velrani believed in the sacred duty of witnessing. If Kethvor wished to document this war for history, that was his right. He wished now that she had found a way to stop him. The USS Vanguard was commanded by Captain Lisa Monroe, a woman with short gray hair and pale eyes that seemed to look through everything they saw. She had welcomed Kethvor aboard with professional courtesy but little warmth. She had better things to do than babysit an alien observer. Kethvor did not mind. He had not come for friendship. He had come to understand. But the more he watched, the less he understood. The humans around him were preparing for war. That much was obvious. Every corridor buzzed with activity. Every station was manned around the clock. Supplies were loaded, weapons were checked, and drills were run with mechanical precision. What disturbed Kethvor was the silence. He had expected anger. He had expected hatred and battle cries and speeches about vengeance. That was how other species went to war. They whipped themselves into fury. They burned hot with righteous rage. The humans burned cold. Sergeant Kevin Holt was one of the Marine squad leaders aboard the Vanguard. He was a large man with a kind face and gentle hands. In the weeks before New Haven, he had taught Kethvor human card games and shared stories of his young daughter back on Earth. He had laughed easily and often. He did not laugh anymore. Kethvor found him in the armory one evening, checking his weapons with slow and careful movements. The alien sat down beside him and watched in silence. You are different now, Kethvor finally said. All of you are different. Holt did not look up from his work. His voice was quiet and flat. "We are the same as we always were. You just did not see all of us before. I do not understand." Holt paused. He set down the weapon he was cleaning and turned to face Keth Vor. His eyes were tired. Humans are good at pretending. We smile and joke and act like everything is fine because that is how we survive. But underneath all that, there is something else. Something we do not show to anyone. What is it? Holt was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "We call it different things. The wolf, the beast, the darkness. It is the part of us that knows how to hurt things, the part that remembers we used to hunt in packs and paint ourselves in the blood of our enemies." He picked up his weapon again. "Most of the time, we keep it locked away. We build laws and societies and rules to make sure it never gets out. Because when it does, bad things happen. And now?" Holt's hands tightened on the weapon. "Now 40,000 of our people are dead. A hospital full of children is ash. And all those locks we built?" He shook his head slowly. "They do not work anymore." Keth Vor felt cold. 2 days later, he attended a fleet-wide briefing in the Vanguard's main conference room. Admiral Nathan Cole stood at the front, a tall man with white hair and a face carved from stone. He spoke with the calm precision of someone discussing routine logistics. Keth Vor had expected a speech about justice and righteous fury. He got a battle plan. "We will enter Drakon space through the Varus corridor," the admiral said. "First wave will eliminate their outer defense stations. Second wave will push through to their naval yards. Third wave will proceed to Drakon Prime itself." On the holographic display, red lines marked attack vectors. Blue dots showed human fleet positions. Green circles highlighted primary targets. "Our objective is total military neutralization," the admiral continued. "We will destroy their ability to wage war. Their fleets will be eliminated. Their shipyards will be reduced to debris. Their command infrastructure will cease to exist." A young ensign raised his hand. His voice trembled slightly when he spoke. "Sir, what if they surrender?" Admiral Cole looked at him. The silence stretched for a long moment. "They bombed a hospital full of children," the admiral said finally. "What do you think?" The ensign lowered his hand. He did not ask any more questions. Keth Vor understood then what he was witnessing. This was not a war. Wars had rules and limits, and the possibility of negotiation. This was something older and darker. This was punishment. The fleet jumped to the Drakon border at midnight. Keth Vor stood on the observation deck and watched the stars blur and stretch as hundreds of human ships entered faster than light travel together. Captain Monroe joined him at the window. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her pale eyes fixed on the emptiness ahead. "You should not be here," she said quietly. "Carter warned you. He told you to go home." "He did," Keth Vor agreed. "I did not listen." "Why?" Monroe glanced at him. Her expression was unreadable. "My people believe in witnessing," Keth Vor said. "When great things happen, someone must be there to remember. To record the truth for those who come after. And what truth do you think you will find here?" Keth Vor looked out at the stars. The fleet moved through space like a swarm of predators, silent and hungry. "I do not know yet," he admitted. "But I think it is a truth the galaxy needs to hear." Monroe was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. "I used to teach history at the Naval Academy." "Did you know that?" "No. Humans have done terrible things to each other throughout our existence. Wars, genocides, cruelties beyond imagination." She paused. "But we have also done beautiful things. We built cathedrals and wrote symphonies and walked on the surface of our moon just to prove we could." She turned to face him fully. "The light and the darkness live in us together. We cannot have one without the other. And tonight, the darkness is in control." Keth Vor looked at the humans moving around the bridge behind them. Officers checking stations. Crew members running final diagnostics. They moved with calm efficiency, their faces blank and focused. He thought of Sergeant Holt and his stories about his daughter. He thought of Commander Carter teaching him to play cards. He thought of all the small kindnesses he had witnessed over 2 years among these people. And he realized he no longer knew them at all. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Drakon space. On the view screen, enemy defense stations hung in the void like metal flowers. Captain Monroe took her seat in the command chair. Her voice was steady when she gave the order. All ships, weapons free. Commence attack. The first shots of the war lit up the darkness like falling stars, and Kethvor, the witness, watched it all begin. The Drakon had expected a war. They got an execution. Kethvor stood on the observation deck of the USS Vanguard and watched the human fleet move through enemy space like a storm that could not be stopped. The Drakon defense stations fell in the first hour. Their patrol fleets were scattered and burning by the end of the first day. There was no announcement. No declaration of war. No demands or ultimatums. The humans simply arrived and began destroying everything in their path. Kethvor had studied military history. He knew how wars were supposed to work. There were rules, traditions, rituals that species followed even in conflict. Enemies faced each other. Words were exchanged. Honor was invoked. The humans followed none of these rules. Their tactics were brutal and efficient. They did not meet the Drakon in open battle. They struck from unexpected angles, using faster-than-light jumps to appear where they should not be. They hit supply lines first, cutting off reinforcements before the Drakon even knew they were under attack. They targeted communication relays, blinding their enemy to the scope of the invasion. It was not fighting, it was hunting. Lieutenant Amy Chen was the tactical officer on the Vanguard's bridge. She was young, barely out of the academy, with a soft face that made her look even younger. Kethvor had spoken with her a few times before the war. She had been cheerful and curious, full of questions about Velrani culture. Now she sat at her station with tears streaming down her face as she pressed firing commands. Kethvor approached her during a brief pause between engagements. He did not know what to say, so he simply stood beside her in silence. "You are crying," he finally said. Chen did not look at him. Her eyes were fixed on her screens, watching targeting data scroll past. "Yes. Why do you continue if it causes you such pain?" She was quiet for a long moment. When she answered, her voice was thick with something Kethvor could not name. "Because they killed our children," she said. "Because if I stop, someone else has to take my place. Someone else has to carry this weight." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, but did not stop working. "I know what we are doing is wrong. I can feel it in my soul. But I am doing it anyway." She turned to look at him then, and the anguish in her eyes struck him like a physical blow. "That is the worst part," she whispered. "I know it is wrong. And I do not care." The Drakon commander Vex Ral attempted communication on the fourth day. Kethvor was on the bridge when the transmission came through. Captain Monroe listened without expression as the alien voice filled the room. "Human vessels, this is Commander Vex Ral of the Drakon Hegemony. We are prepared to discuss terms for ceasing hostilities. The attack on your colony was the decision of our military council, not our people. We offer formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing and reparations for those lost." The bridge was silent. Officers looked at Captain Monroe, waiting. She stood slowly from her command chair. Her pale eyes were fixed on the view screen where Vex Ral's transmission originated. "Commander Vex Ral," she said. Her voice was calm and cold. "I want to make sure I understand your offer correctly. You destroyed New Haven. You killed 40,000 civilians. You bombed a hospital full of children and refugees. And now you want to talk about reparations." There was a pause before Vex Ral responded. "We acknowledge that the attack was excessive. We are prepared to negotiate appropriate compensation." Monroe nodded slowly. "I see. Let me give you our counteroffer." She leaned forward slightly. New Haven did not get to negotiate. New Haven did not get to surrender. Your ships arrived without warning and started killing. No one asked those children if they wanted to die. No one gave them the choice. Her voice hardened. "You do not get that choice either." She turned to her tactical officer. "End this transmission. Continue the attack." "Captain," Vex Ral said quickly, "this is genocide. You are destroying our entire military infrastructure. You cannot. Monroe paused. She looked back at the view screen. You are right, she said quietly. We cannot do this. We should not do this. Everything you are saying is true. She straightened her shoulders. But you killed our children. And now we are going to show you what that means. The transmission cut off. The battle resumed. Keth Vor watched the destruction from the observation deck. He could not look away. The Dracon homeworld was not destroyed. The humans were precise in their violence. They targeted military installations, shipyards, weapons factories, command centers. Civilian areas were left untouched, but everything else burned. Draken ships exploded in silence, their crews dying in the cold vacuum of space. Orbital stations fell from the sky like wounded birds, the pride of the Dracon hegemony. A fleet that had conquered dozens of worlds over 1,000 years was reduced to floating debris in less than a week. Keth Vor found Sergeant Holt on the 6th day, sitting alone in a cargo bay. The big man was staring at his hands as if he did not recognize them. It is done, Keth Vor said quietly. The Dracon have surrendered unconditionally. The war is over. Holt did not look up. Is it? They have no fleet left, no military command. They cannot fight anymore. Holt laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. That is not what I meant. He finally raised his eyes. They were red-rimmed and hollow. I killed people, he said. Not soldiers. People. I watched their ships break apart and knew there were living beings inside them. Fathers, sons. Maybe some of them did not even want to fight. Maybe some of them thought the attack on New Haven was wrong too. He shook his head slowly. But I killed them anyway. Because they were the enemy. Because that was my job. Because someone had to do it. Keth Vor did not know what to say. I need you to remember something for me. Holt continued. His voice cracked. I need you to remember that I did not want this. None of us wanted this. We are not monsters. We are just people who became monsters when we had to. He looked at Keth Vor with desperate eyes. Remember that we were good once. Remember that we tried to be kind. And remember that when someone killed our children, we stopped being kind. That is who we are. That is what we can become. Keth Vor reached out and placed his hand on Holt's shoulder. The human was trembling. I will remember, Keth Vor said. And I wish I had not, he thought later. The fleet returned to human space 3 days later. They were welcomed as heroes. Crowds gathered at every station, cheering and waving flags. Politicians gave speeches about justice and protection and the price of freedom. Keth Vor watched it all from the Vanguard's observation deck. He thought about Commander Carter's warning. You do not want to see what we become. He understood now. The humans had become something terrible. Something ancient and dark and unstoppable. They had reached down into the depths of their own nature and pulled out the monster that lived there, and then they had put it back. That was the part that frightened him most. They could do it again. Anytime someone hurt them badly enough, they could become this again. The monster never truly went away. It just waited. Keth Vor looked at the celebrating humans below. They were hugging and crying and laughing with relief. And somewhere inside each of them, the darkness waited for its next call. He could not stop trembling, but he would not understand that until much later. 2 years after the war, Keth Vor lived on a human colony world called Meridian. He told himself it was for continued observation. His reports to the Velrani government required ongoing documentation of human culture and behavior. There was important work to be done, data to be gathered, conclusions to be drawn. But the truth was simpler and harder to admit. He could not go home. His own people would not understand what he had witnessed. They would read his reports and see only numbers and facts. They would not feel the weight of Lieutenant Chen's tears, or hear the crack in Sergeant Holt's voice. They would not understand how a species could be capable of such warmth and such darkness at the same time. Keth Vor understood now. And that understanding had changed him in ways he could not undo. Dr. Ryan Torres was a human psychiatrist who specialized in war trauma. He had served in the medical corps during the Draken conflict and now ran a practice in Meridian's capital city. Keth Vor visited him every week. The office was small and comfortable, filled with soft chairs and warm light. Torres was a thin man with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He never pushed too hard. He never demanded answers. He simply listened. "I still see them," Kethvor said during one of their sessions. "The ship's burning. The station's falling. I close my eyes, and it all comes back." Torres nodded slowly. "That is normal. Trauma leaves marks on us. It changes how our minds process memory. I was only an observer. I did not fire any weapons. I did not kill anyone. Witnessing can be just as difficult as participating. Sometimes, harder." Torres leaned forward slightly. "You saw something that challenged your understanding of reality. You watched beings you cared about transform into something you did not recognize. That kind of experience breaks apart how we see the world." Kethvor was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "How do your people live with it?" Torres considered the question. "We struggle," he admitted. "Many of us carry scars that never fully heal. We have nightmares. We have moments when the past comes flooding back without warning." He paused. "But we also learn to carry the weight. We find ways to keep moving forward despite what we have done and what we have seen. It is not forgiveness. It is not redemption. It is just survival." "That does not sound like peace," Torres smiled sadly. "It is not. But it is the best we can do." Kethvor attended a memorial ceremony for New Haven that spring. The event was held in a public park, surrounded by trees that had been planted to honor the dead. Each tree represented 100 lives lost. There were 400 trees. He stood at the back of the crowd and watched the humans gather. They wore dark clothing and carried flowers. Some wept openly. Others stood in silence, their faces carved from stone. A young woman approached him after the ceremony ended. She had dark hair and warm brown eyes that reminded Kethvor of someone he had once known. "You are the alien observer," she said. "The one who was with my father during the war." Kethvor looked at her more closely. Recognition dawned slowly. "Megan Holt," he said. "Sergeant Holt's daughter." She nodded. "He talked about you in his letters. Said you were one of the good ones. One of the aliens who actually tried to understand us. Your father was a good man." Kethvor paused. "He was kind to me when he did not have to be." Megan smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "He was kind to everyone. Even after everything he saw and did, he never stopped being kind." She gestured toward one of the memorial trees. "He planted that one himself. Came out here every month to make sure it was growing well. Said it was his way of trying to put something good back into the world." Kethvor looked at the tree. It was tall and strong, its leaves catching the sunlight. He did not know what to say. He thought about the man he had known during the war, the soldier with the empty eyes and trembling hands. And he thought about this tree, growing in memory of the dead. Megan seemed to sense his confusion. She touched his arm gently. "That is who we are," she said. "We break things and then we try to fix them. We hurt people and then we try to heal them. We are never just one thing." She walked away, leaving Kethvor alone with the memorial trees. Later that week, a young man found Kethvor at a cafe near his apartment. The stranger had white hair like Admiral Cole and the same stone-carved features. "You are Kethvor," the man said. "The Velrani observer." "I am." "And you are?" "Derek Cole." The man sat down across from him without asking permission. "My father commanded the fleet that destroyed the Drakon." Kethvor tensed. He remembered Admiral Cole's cold eyes and colder voice. He remembered the order to continue attacking even after the enemy offered surrender. "What do you want?" Derek laughed bitterly. "I want to understand. Everyone calls my father a hero. They say he saved humanity. They give him medals and put his picture in history books." His voice dropped low. "But I have seen him wake up screaming every night since the war ended. I have heard him crying in the shower when he thinks no one is listening. I have watched him stare at nothing for hours, lost in memories he cannot escape." Derek leaned forward. His eyes were bright with frustrated tears. "Heroes are not supposed to hate themselves. Heroes are not supposed to fall apart when the fighting is done. So either my father is not a hero, Or the stories we tell about heroes are all lies? Kethvor considered his words carefully. Perhaps, he said slowly, your father is simply a person, not a hero, not a villain, just a being who did terrible things because he believed they were necessary. And now he must live with the weight of those choices. Derek was silent for a long moment. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. Kethvor shook his head. It is simply the truth. Your father is not a monster. He is something more complicated than that. He is a man who became a monster when he had to, and now must remember being human again. He looked out the window at the busy street. I do not know if that is better or worse, but it is what I have witnessed. Derek stood abruptly. He looked like he wanted to say something more, but the words would not come. Instead, he simply nodded once and walked away. That night, Kethvor found a message waiting on his communication device. It was from Ambassador Lyraseth, his former superior. The message was brief and formal. The ambassador requested his return to Velrani space. His observations were valuable, and his government wished to debrief him in person. There were concerns about his extended stay among humans, questions about his judgment and objectivity. Kethvor read the message twice, then he deleted it. He was not ready to leave. Perhaps he never would be. He had come to Meridian to understand humanity, and he was beginning to realize that understanding might take a lifetime. The humans were not redeemed. They could not undo what they had done, but they were trying to live with it, trying to build something good from the ashes of their own darkness. Kethvor did not know if that was enough. 5 years after the war, Kethvor finally understood why he had stayed. It came to him on an ordinary morning, walking through the streets of Meridian's capital. The sun was warm on his skin, and the air smelled of bread from the bakeries and flowers from the window boxes that lined every street. Children ran past him, laughing and chasing each other. A mother called out for her son to be careful. An old man sat on a bench, reading a book and smiling at nothing in particular. This was the same species that had burned the Dracon fleet to ash. These laughing children, these gentle elders, these ordinary people going about their ordinary lives. They carried the same darkness inside them that Kethvor had witnessed during the war. The monster slept within each of them, waiting for the day it might be needed again. And yet here they were, baking bread and growing flowers and raising children. Kethvor stopped walking. He stood in the middle of the busy street and let the truth wash over him. He had stayed because humans needed witnesses. They needed someone to remember both their light and their darkness. Someone who had seen the worst of them and would not let them forget. Someone who could stand outside their species and hold up a mirror to show them what they were capable of becoming. Without witnesses, history became myth. Without observers, truth became legend. The humans would tell stories about the Dracon War, but stories had a way of smoothing over the sharp edges of reality. They would make themselves heroes or victims. They would forget the tears on Lieutenant Chen's face and the trembling in Sergeant Holt's hands. Kethvor would not forget. He visited Daniel Carter that afternoon. The former commander had retired from military service 3 years ago. He now ran a small bakery in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. The shop smelled of fresh bread and cinnamon, and the walls were covered with pictures of Carter's family spanning several generations. Carter looked up when Kethvor entered. His face broke into a genuine smile. "The alien observer," he said warmly. "I wondered when you would find your way here." He gestured to a small table by the window. "Sit. Let me get you something fresh from the oven." Kethvor sat and watched Carter move behind the counter. The man was softer now than he had been during the war. His movements were slower, his eyes kinder. The hollow emptiness that had frightened Kethvor so many years ago was gone, or perhaps it was simply hidden deeper. Carter returned with warm bread and 2 cups of tea. He sat across from Kethvor and studied him with those familiar gray eyes. "You have been on Meridian for 5 years now," Carter said. "That is a long time to be away from your own people. My people do not understand what I witnessed. They read my reports and see data. They do not see truth." Carter nodded slowly. "Truth is harder to share than facts. Facts can be written down. Truth has to be felt." He took a sip of his tea. "Why did you stay?" Kethvor considered the question. He had asked himself the same thing countless times over the years. The answer had changed as time passed. At first, I stayed because I could not leave, he said. The war had broken something inside me. I did not know how to go back to my old life. And now? Now I stay because I understand my purpose. Kethvor met Carter's eyes. You need witnesses. Someone who saw what you became and what you are trying to become now. Someone who will remember the truth when the stories start to change. Carter was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Do you hate us for what we did? Kethvor thought about the question carefully. He thought about the burning ships, and the crying officers, and the cold efficiency of human violence. He thought about the memorial trees and the struggling veterans, and the children playing in the streets. No, he said finally. I do not hate you. I fear what you can become. But I do not hate you. He paused. I think perhaps I pity you. You carry such terrible weight. You know what you are capable of. And you must live with that knowledge every day. Carter laughed quietly. It was a sad sound. That is a fair description, he admitted. He looked out the window at the street beyond. I think about New Haven every day, he said. 40,000 dead. Children burned alive in a hospital. And then I think about what we did in response. Thousands more dead. An entire civilization brought to its knees. His hands tightened around his cup. I do not know which memory hurts more. Being the victim or being the monster. Both of them wake me up at night. How do you live with it? Carter turned back to face him. His eyes were clear and steady. I do not live with it, he said. I live despite it. Every loaf of bread I bake, every smile I share with my grandchildren, every small act of kindness I can manage. Those are my answers to what I did. They do not erase the past, but they are what I can offer to the future. Kethvor attended Sergeant Holt's memorial service that evening. The big soldier had died of natural causes 2 years ago, but his family held a gathering every year to remember him. Megan Holt found Kethvor at the edge of the crowd. She was older now, with gray starting to touch her dark hair. But her eyes were still warm, still kind. Thank you for coming, she said. It would have meant a lot to him. He spoke of you often during the war, Kethvor said. He loved you very much. I know. She smiled sadly. He came home different than when he left. Quieter, more careful with his words. But he never stopped loving us. He never stopped trying to be good. She looked at the memorial plaque that bore her father's name. I think the war killed him slowly, she said quietly. Not his body. His soul. He carried so much guilt that it wore him down, piece by piece. Do you hate the people who sent him to fight? Megan considered the question. No, she said finally. I hate the Dracon who attacked New Haven. I hate the circumstances that made the war necessary. But I do not hate our own people. They did what they thought they had to do. Just like my father. She turned to face Kethvor fully. That is the tragedy of being human, she said. We are capable of such love and such violence. We cannot have one without the other. And when we choose violence, even for good reasons, it leaves marks on us that never fade. Kethvor left the memorial service as the sun began to set. He walked through the quiet streets toward his apartment, thinking about everything he had witnessed over the past 5 years. The humans were not redeemed. They would never be redeemed. The blood on their hands would not wash away with time or good deeds. They had done terrible things, and those things would echo through history forever. But they were trying. Every day, they woke up and chose to be better than their worst moments. They built bakeries and planted trees and raised children to believe in kindness. They carried the weight of their darkness and kept walking forward anyway. That night, Kethvor sat at his desk and wrote his final observation report. Not for the Velrani government. Not for history. Just for himself. I survived humanity's wrath, he wrote. I watched them become something terrible, something ancient and unstoppable. I saw the monster that lives inside them, and I was afraid, but I also saw what came after. I saw them grieve for what they had done. I saw them struggle to rebuild themselves from the ashes of their own violence. I saw them plant trees for the dead and bake bread for the living and love their children with desperate tenderness. They are not redeemed. They will never be redeemed. But they are trying. Every single day, they are trying. I wish I had not stayed to see their wrath. That memory will haunt me forever. But I am glad I stayed to see what came after. Because now I understand something important about this strange, terrifying, beautiful species. They are the light and the darkness, the love and the violence, the mercy and the monster. They are all of these things at once, and they cannot separate one from the other. And perhaps that is the most human thing of all. Kethvor set down his pen and looked out the window. The stars were bright above Meridian. Somewhere in the city below, human children were being tucked into bed by loving parents. Somewhere, veterans were waking from nightmares and reaching for the comfort of familiar hands. Somewhere, bread was rising in ovens and flowers were opening in gardens, and life was continuing despite everything. The galaxy's most terrifying species was having a peaceful evening. And Kethvor, the witness, the observer, the one who stayed, finally closed his eyes and rested. But he knew he wanted to see what came next.